Welcome, everybody. Thank you for everyone who's attending in the classroom. We've got a full house and we've got several people online. So thanks for coming this afternoon. This is, as you know, a student support team workshop. This one is about the imposter syndrome. And we thought it'd be kind of fun to have the little play on words. If you saw Mr. and Miss Potato Head in their costumes, kind of kicking it to the curb with a Halloween theme and a hot potato, baked potato bar in the room. So there is a method to the madness, believe it or not. My name is Sarah Flanagan. I'm the Director of Community Health and Interprofessional Engagement. And so my role here is really dual purpose. I'm on the student support team, part of the team that helps put on different events all year long for all the students, but also with the IPE connection. So if any of you students, as long as you've finished your first 4 modules, if you're interested in using this can count for either knowledge or community. We just ask that you please remember to submit your reflection within 90 days or it won't count. That's 3 months. That's a long time. I would really love it if you did it within a week, because the quality of your reflection will be a lot more valuable and meaningful to you. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker. This is Maureen O'Donnell. Maureen and I have known each other for, oh my gosh, probably over 20 years now at this point. So we're always honored and grateful to have her join us. Maureen will do a little introduction for herself, so you know that she really has a lot to offer, tons of history with Clarkson College, a lot to offer with this topic in particular. And at the end, if we have time, we'll open it to questions as well. So the floor is yours, Maureen.
Okay.
Can everybody hear her online?
Make sure this clicker works too. Whoops.
Whoops. Helps to turn it on.
Yeah.
There we go. Let's try that.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. As she said, my name is Maureen O'Donnell, and I work with Arbor Family Counseling. Arbor has been in Omaha since 1993, and actually, we began working with Clarkson Hospital in '95. And so we got a good history with you all and your predecessors and the roots of your education today. And yes, I have been a counselor since 1985 and worked with a lot of professionals, a lot of medical professionals, a lot of different kinds of people experiencing imposter syndrome, anywhere from their profession to their schooling to their relationships, you know. And so seeing many different faces of the imposter syndrome and the anxiety that it can create. And yes, I thought it was funny that Sarah also that she put in the Halloween potato head costume theme, because I was thinking to myself, I'm coming to talk about imposter syndrome during a season, right? During a Halloween, a holiday of imposters. And I don't know what you guys think about when you think about Halloween. I've got the blessing. I was just telling somebody, my daughter and her family, my grandkids are back here in Omaha now. So this is a Halloween like no other, right? And enjoying that. But when I think about, like, when you think about Halloween, what do you think of? Just think this to yourself. Like, when you think about Halloween, you think about kids, costumes you've worn in the past. You're going to wear costume you're going to wear on Monday, or that you're going to wear tomorrow, you know, the get-togethers. Or do you think about candy? You know, the kid in you comes out. Or do you think like me about this? I put a spell on you. Remember, the second one just came out, and talk about 3 lovely ladies that look wonderful. You know, and if you think about it, Hocus Pocus, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but Hocus Pocus came out in 1993. Arbor started in 1993. Hocus Pocus brought their second movie out in 2022, and Arbor opened its second office in 2022. So when I sing that song, I've got a little bit of a relationship to it. But the subtitle, Taming the Internal Beast, is really what it's about. It's my work with people. It's all of our work. All of us, whether we have imposter syndrome or not, there's a degree of negative self-talk and self-doubt within all of us. Some of it's very healthy, some of it is not. And we'll talk about the difference today. But while I talk about this, I'll also be asking you questions about yourself. I'll ask you to answer questions. Some of it will be maybe all of it, if you're eating through the whole thing, maybe all of it will just be within yourself, or it might be a little bit with the person next to you, okay? But I really congratulate you for showing up to this. This is a untamed beast in too many people, just like anxiety is, right? It's a form of anxiety, but it's an untamed beast in too many people. And the answer is to not keep it silent, not keep it inside. But it convinces you the opposite. But I want to remind you that Arbor does have a contract with Clarkson College. We've been doing it for many years, and it gives you the Julie on campus as well as I think it's Jessica. That's the other one, Jenny. Thank you. But at Arbor, I see a lot of students at Arbor, and you can come, you get 3 free sessions there on site. Here it's unlimited, but it's 24-hour availability there through the holidays, through everything. You can give us a call, we're going to pick it up. We're in the middle of creating some more ability to access us, an app where it would be 24-hour chat with us, where it would just be, we could request an appointment through that, just really ease of use. And that's what we want, because we don't want you to get so far down that hole of anxiety or depression, whatever, and feel like you can't reach out. We want some very, very, and I know the staff here, it really promotes mental health very well. You can have urgent appointments, you can get in same day. You have had emergencies here at the college where we've come here the same day. Sessions are available days, evenings, and weekends. And then, of course, like the rest of the world, like we were doing telehealth before COVID, but we're doing a whole lot of it now. And some people love it. Some people utilize it to the max. And other people are like, I want to sit across from my therapist. I don't want to be going through a screen with them. So it's different things for different needs and different people. But we're responsive. We see ourselves as a partner with the college to provide the strongest students to you and help you stay the strongest, and just address the roadblocks, the mental health roadblocks that are in the way, especially at this unprecedented time. You're entering into medicine at an unprecedented time. You need additional tools just because of that. And this is part of that. So in the on-site services for various emergencies, and then training, including this, right? You guys could say to your professors, we would like Arbor to come and talk about this, whatever this is, and we'll come talk about it, okay? Here's a question. First question will just be to yourself, okay? Why the medical profession? When did you first know? And when you knew and you started to know, what was your vision of you being a medical person? What did that look like? What did that look like? Were you inspired by someone on TV? Were you inspired by somebody in your family? What did that look like to you? And what were your expectations? Imposter syndrome is directly related to expectations and your vision, So anybody want to shout out? Like, I knew I was going to be a counselor when I was a kid. I knew I was a kid. I played life and I always wanted to land on the psychiatrist square, right? I mean, I was like 8, 7, so who knows what that was about, but it never went away from me. Like all through high school, as I learned more about psychiatry, and then I learned more about, counseling, social, all that, it just never left me. It fascinated me more and more, and the field that I chose. So it was always kind of with me. Other people at Arbor maybe it's their second career, and they're awesome because they bring all that life experience, right? And so when did you first know? Anybody want to offer that? Like, when was that? Do you remember? Or was it? Go ahead. Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Inspired by a parent that would tell stories at the dinner table. Love it, love it. Anybody else? Yes. You were hooked. How old were you when your sister was born? 6. There you go. There you go. We share that at a very young age. So you were quite fascinated and you wanted to be part of that team. You're like, I want to be, like, that's cool. I want to be part of, like, they can make a baby be born. Wow. I want to be a part of that. Very good. Thank you. And I have nephews that were, one nephew, two nephews that are doctors. One was inspired by the siblings that had juvenile diabetes. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Ah, okay. And then how did the medical profession come into play? You had some skills that lent to that. You're like, I don't have those search and rescue skills. I'm going to go this way instead. Very good. Thank you. Anybody else? When did you know? Yes. Oh, cool. Wow. Yeah, everybody else knew before you. Yeah, they just let you catch up, but it spoke to that. It was just right. It was just part of me, and it kind of grew inside of me, you know. And then some people have some professions where it's right for them. It grows inside of them. They're like, oh, I don't know if I want to do that, you know, and they kind of run from it. I've heard that about clergy. Sometimes they're like, oh, that's a hard life, right? I don't know if I want to do that. And they run from it, but they end up back at it. So there is that experience. Okay, what was your vision? Like, I'll go back to the last part. What was your vision? Were you going to be a Florence Nightingale? Oh, excellent, excellent. Okay. And so it's what's your vision around that? Like, what do you, and then right below that vision is what do you expect? What do you expect? Like my vision under being a counselor was being a family counselor because I came from a family of 11. And so I was like, I'm so comfortable, you know. Other counselors say, oh, that many people in the room intimidate me. I'd say, oh, I love it. Actually, my energy goes up when there's a group. And I often work with adult groups, adult family members having conflict, and as well as kids and their families, right? But my energy goes up when there's that many people. So my expectation was I'm going to be in the room and there's not going to just be one person always. There's sometimes going to be a lot of people in the room. What was your expectation of what is your expectation of what this nursing job or this medical job that it's going to include? And what's your expectation of yourself? What's your expectation of yourself? 24, I look back and I say I was a snot-nosed kid. I didn't know a thing when I became a counselor. I didn't know a thing. I was pretending. I was acting. I was just trying to be good at listening and challenging and feeding back and be affirming, but challenging when I needed to challenge, right? But man, oh man, I was pedaling under the water as fast as I could because I felt like I didn't know anything. And I didn't at 24, right? You know some things, you know, some basic things, but there's a lot of wisdom you don't have at 24. So how about you guys? What do you think are your expectations of how you will act? Yeah. So it's like, what are your expectations of how you will perform? What are your expectations of what it will require from you? And we're entering right into imposter syndrome with this question. What are your expectations of what the job will be like? And what are your expectations of yourself? Anybody have any, like, if you're a student in the room, just can you speak to what do you expect of yourself when you get into the profession? It's hard to kind of go out there and say that, but anybody have any input on that at all?
Online, they said empowering patients is their
Thank you.
expectation.
Thank you for reading out what they're saying. Yes, I expect to empower people. Yeah, very good, very good. And empowering people is what it's all about. And there's going to be moments where I'm trying to empower somebody and it's not so easy. It's not so easy, but I expect that I will always empower people. They will mostly always, right? So it's what anybody else have what they expect? Go ahead.
So I've worked with students who are transitioning into working into pediatric nursing. And it wasn't my expectation that I was going to save every person's life, but realistically, we can't save every person's life because sometimes it's their time. And so whether that's a 2-month-old or a 10-year-old or an 85-year-old, like you can't save everybody. So that's just something that I wanted to kind of reiterate out to our students. Yes, there are some patients that you can save, but you're there to do your best and to help them any way you can.
So that's excellent. You can't save everybody. And the question is, what are your expectations of the job and how you're going to perform it? We idealize our job until we get there, right? We idealize how we're able to help out. There might be somebody else online saying something, but we idealize how we're able to help out, and we idealize how hard it might be. Because we don't know. We don't know until we're in those situations. But go ahead.
One person said to not mess up, at least at the beginning.
Expect to not mess up.
And then my performance is truly not to get too zealous caring for patients because it's important to focus on myself.
Excellent, excellent.
And then just to help patients starting in the business office.
Very good. Excellent. Yeah. And so just to, thank you. Hi. Just to help people, right? And to be there for them, to help them advance. So the imposter syndrome is, this is what I know, and this is what others think I know. My nephew, that's a doctor, I talked to him last summer and I was like, how's it going? And he's like, well, I'm at a community health center, and they come to me and they say, can you help me with this disease or this disease? He's like, well, let me go home and study that tonight. Let me go home and figure that out, you know? And so I think that some of this is normal, but then with enough self-doubt, with enough negative self-talk and fears, your vision stays here even though this grows. Your vision isn't that it grows. It's that it stays very limited and is always inadequate. And we all feel that way in the beginning, right? You feel inadequate trying anything new in the beginning. But the self-doubt and the negative self-talk keeps that, your vision of that, very narrow. So it's feeling like a phony. And we'll talk about how to counteract those feelings. But despite your success, and it's feeling restless, like I'm never really settled. And some of this everyone feels in the beginning, but it never settles down. And it shows up in the negative self-talk, self-doubt, fears of being found out. What if we took out that fears of being found out? What if we took that last part out and just said, how many people are struggling a little bit with negative self-talk or self-doubt? How many people feel like they have some, I guess, quite normal? Like if you're in the beginning and you're not having that, well, then I'm kind of afraid to come to you, right? I want you to be cautious. I want you to be mindful of how you approach me. But if it becomes fears that are unmanageable, then that's when it really starts to trip you up. And yes, everyone, including Albert Einstein, the exaggerated esteem in which my life work is held makes me very ill at ease. I feel compelled to think of myself as an involuntary swindler. Like, what did this guy invent? Like, how many things did he invent, right? Like, we still talk about him, Albert Einstein. You say Einstein, everybody knows what you're talking about. How many years later? And this guy thought he was a swindler. And what's the gap? What's the gap? I think in medicine, the gap, vulnerable to be bigger because medicine changes so much. Dance has changed so much. You have so much to stay on top of that you need that self-talk to be kinder, right? To be stronger and more forgiving. But it's like the mindset is, I'm a phony. I'm not really smart. I don't know how I made it through school, you know, and I feel like I'm just fooling everybody. All going to catch up. I'm going to be found out at some point. And that's when it gets really debilitating. What I told Trish on the way here is I love that they're bringing that up with students, because we're going to normalize some feelings that you're going to have so that you don't feel like, and what's wrong with me? Because everybody else feels like they got it taken care of. And that's what I hear year after year. What's wrong with me? Everybody else seems like they're running around the hospital doing just fine. And they're not. They have a lot of the same feelings. So do I have imposter syndrome? And this is a book that was, I'm not saying it's scientific. I'm not saying it's what you should read, but it had a bunch of great reviews, okay, on Amazon. And that's all the credit I'm going to give it, okay? But she was, high up in corporate America, and that's why she was doubting herself in Silicon Valley, I think it was. Imposter syndrome did originally come out of women that were making it up the ladder quickly and doubting themselves because the culture and the peers, nothing was like, yeah, you go. It was a lot of questioning of them, and they were internalizing a lot of that. And that's where it came from in the beginning in the 70s, right? So do you answer these questions for yourself? Do you agonize over even the smallest mistakes or flaws in your work? You attribute your success to luck or outside factors. I barely got that done. I was kind of lucky. don't know how I'm going to get it done next time. You become very sensitive to even constructive criticism. Like, I don't want to hear anything negative. It's going to scare the heck out of me. I'm going down the wrong track. You feel like you will inevitably be found out. Phony, or maybe just found out that you're not as smart as all the others, or talented as all the others, or good as all the others. And we're going to talk in a few minutes about how some of that self-talk can get ingrained in your mind. Because the invitation today is, if you have a good degree of it, like if it's persistent and you're hearing it a lot, then our invitation is take advantage of the good services. Going to Student Success Center because you've got too much self-doubt and negative self-talk is the same as going to the Student Success Center to help you, pass a class. It's the same. It's the same. Take advantage of them. But do you feel like you will inevitably be found out as a phony? Do you downplay your own expertise, even in areas where you're genuinely more skilled than others? Do you downplay that expertise? You have a fear factor around it. What it's saying is, are you afraid of all this? Is this scaring you? And you're in a field where a lot of people are scared when they start out, aren't they? I read lots of studies, and you guys probably read them a lot in school. What's the number one fear of medical people when they start out? What's the number one fear? You heard that in any studies? Making a mistake. Who said that? Making a mistake, and making a mistake that will lead to death. That's the number one. Not just making a mistake, but making a mistake that's going to be very costly in the person that you're helping. Okay. Types. Okay, I want you to look at this. And I want you to see, okay, am I in any of these? Am I the perfectionist? No mistakes, and that's a setup, we all know, right? But I'm not gonna ask people to raise hands or anything, but I just want to look at this and see where you're at. The perfectionist, no mistakes necessary. The perfectionist usually does pretty good in school. The perfectionist usually, does quite high on all their exams, and they work extra hard to not make mistakes. They plan, they go over things 4, 5, 10, 20 times. For a perfectionist, I'm going to give you the type, and then I'm going to give you what will help that type. If you see yourself in one of these, I'm just going to talk a little bit about what will help. So celebrate your achievements. The perfectionist famous statement is, yeah, but, right? I got a 99.9, but I missed that one, right? I did awesome on my clinicals or my preceptor, but one thing happened, and that was. And so celebrate even if you don't completely feel it, work kind of like a system of, I'm going to do this even if I don't completely feel it, until it lowers the intensity of the negativity or the fears. So celebrate your achievements, no matter how small they are. That helps you to cultivate the self-confidence. It helps you to cultivate that. Learn to treat mistakes as a learning, as a natural learning. I have struggled at times. Anybody struggle with mistakes being a learning? Like, you just don't even want to make them. Yeah. And so what did I learn from this? Like, when you have that awful feeling of the mistake that wasn't perfect, follow it up with, what did I learn from this? What am I supposed to have learned from this? Okay. And then push yourself to act before you're ready. That's the perfectionist. Like, no, wait a minute, I got to prepare a little bit more. No, wait a minute, I'm not just quite done. No, do it. Like, set yourself a timeline and say, it'll be done here. And that's very hard for perfectionists, but start trying in little ways to get yourself to do that, whether it's with a paper, an assignment, a small activity, then you can build up, because you want to take that into your job, okay? Yeah, it says accept less than 100%, accept flawless, accept having a mistake, accept. That's like an impossible request for a perfectionist, is to accept. And can anybody shed light on that? Like, how is it that it's possible to accept being less than perfect, making a mistake? How's it possible? Anybody have any comments about that, or thoughts or suggestions, or share? This is how I help myself. Go ahead.
I think this is something that I probably struggled with. And for me, it puts things into perspective when people have offered me grace. like, oh, no, it wasn't your fault. Don't worry about it. It's okay. And then like, oh, that applies to me too with whatever the situation might be that, if you make a mistake, you make a mistake and you move on, you learn from it and you move on.
Not the end of the world. Thank you. Anybody else? Like in the back, we got somebody, or right there.
My mentor tells me, I don't know, she always is like, be gentle with yourself, like, especially like when I get in like negative talk or like, oh, wow, I could have done a lot better on that quiz, even though I like got the 99. It's like, be gentle with yourself.
Be gentle. How long have you been hearing that from your advisor or mentor?
Year.
Okay. And has there been a few moments that you kind of said it to yourself, like, okay.
Yeah, I'll be like alone and like be like down and I'll be like, okay, Megan, be gentle with yourself.
Yeah. So you're internalizing that. So we'll talk about mentors and how critical they are, but with imposter syndrome, especially perfectionism, but all of them, you have to develop some statements to yourself, right? Yeah, very good. Thank you. And I think right behind you, go back to you have one too? Yeah. Thank you.
I know like the 100% flawless thing is something I've really struggled with all of high school. I've been like an A average student for most of my life. And senior year, it nearly drove me crazy trying to keep that up. So now that I'm in college, I've kind of let myself take a step back. Like, it's okay to get less than a 90. I mean, 85 is not a bad grade. But for so long, for me, it was like 89, failure. That's how it felt for a long time, but I've been trying to get over that recently.
What helped you? What helped you say, 89 is not the end of the world. 80,
Just realizing like how bad I felt for getting like an 87. I felt so terrible. But like looking at the people around me, I realized that that's okay.
Like she's celebrating an 89. Yeah.
I put so much more pressure on myself than a lot of other people do.
So you did a good job of looking around you and saying, these people aren't putting that pressure on themselves. I'm making myself sick. So then you started saying to yourself, okay, I got to say something different here. I got to take some of this pressure off. And I think that's at the base of everything we're talking about today. How can I take this pressure off instead of putting it on? Some pressure's good, motivates me to excel, right? But not to the point, like you said in high school, not to the point where I'm making myself sick here. Very good example. Thank you. Okay.
I guess just kind of a lighter example, but the immediate thing that came to my mind when you were talking about that, and I can't even take credit for it. It's my mom, who Maureen, but she always said she was a director of nursing across the street, and she obviously had to be kind of type A as a part of her job. And so kind of developed some of these tendencies. And she always said taking up crocheting was very good for her because it was a practice in accepting flaws. She'd get to the end of a blanket or whatever it was, having put, 100+ hours of work into it, and would not until that point notice a flaw, but was like, you couldn't have spent that much time on something and not see the beauty in it and not see the value in it. And so I think for her, that was a very good lesson in this.
That's a wonderful story. Very tangible, very physical. I love that. And I love that it was non-medical. That's what I love about it, right? And it is like when we're outside of medical and we're doing other things, that those life lessons are like you're on a walk. I can't make myself sick with this 89 thing, right? Or you're crocheting a blanket and you're like, you know what? The blanket is still extremely warm. They love it. They're not pointing out that flaw. I see. Yeah, excellent.
Some things online is, I think, of what I would tell my son if he was in my position.
Very good. Very good. If I can add to that, I think, what would I say to my son in that position? And if I say any statement once, I say it 10 million times, it's, would you say that to a friend? I was kind of harsh. Would you say that to a friend? No, then you can't say it to yourself. I had a lot of people say, okay, that was a game changer for me. I'm trying to work on that now, but we are very cruel to ourselves in ways that we've never talked to anybody else. So very good.
Another comment is just learning that mistakes and failures are okay, and that, excuse me, and that I'm only human. So
that's a big one. I'm only human, especially in the medical profession, right? Because I think in the medical profession, and I think in the teaching profession, which you guys both, right? Some of you, that people do expect you to be flawless. They expect great things from you. They see you as kind of superheroes. And I think there was, are you done? There was somebody up
Yeah,
here too.
and then just knowing, kind of finding out what you did right in the moment and then how you would act differently next time with what you did wrong. And struggling with expecting more of myself than I would expect of others too is a struggle for someone.
Right, very good. And I think what you're speaking to that person wrote into the chat was there, this voice is there, like the negative, the self-doubt, I'm an imposter, I'm a phony, this is frustrating. That voice is there, that voice may never go away. It's not to make that voice go away, it's to counter it. Like you have other voices inside of you. One of the voices inside of you likes to say every now and then, enough already, right? And so it's strengthening that other voice that counters it and says something else that's more productive, pointing out but how can that be true if you accomplished all this? Go ahead.
I just wanted to say, to go off of kind of what the last person said, I've been seeing this online, but people are talking about like taking a picture of your younger self, like you as a child, and then like what you're saying to yourself in your mind, like envision yourself saying that to that younger version of yourself and like thinking you would never say that to a small child. So I've heard that it helps people.
I like that a lot. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Very good. Okay, so that's the perfectionist, the natural genius. So the natural genius is sometimes like blurred with the perfectionist, but because the natural genius, things come easy to them, right? So I work with a lot of kids and their families. I work with a lot of adults, and I have identified this phenomenon. And the phenomenon is, at what age did you start getting challenged? And it was crushing to them, to the natural genius. Like, I don't just automatically know everything. And I always say at school, you were supposed to be learning the whole time, not just knowing everything. And that's really hard for them to grasp. They know themselves as someone who innately, or their intelligence is in a way that they can pick up a lot of information and know things and not have to be taught things, right? That's the natural genius. So their ego is wrapped up into already knowing things, not having to be taught. I don't know if we have any of those, but probably a lot of you guys you're here because you're pretty smart, right? And so, you know, you're proud of that, but what to do with that is to really work hard, and it takes a long time. Maybe some of you have already been working on this since, you know, lower school, high school, elementary school, and that is, it's a work in progress. Like, I don't want to be done. I don't want to have to know everything. And that's often my conversation with the genius is, first of all, you got all the way to junior year in high school before you had any trouble with any of your tests? Like, oh my gosh. Or the gentleman that I talked to that was in medical school before he had any trouble on any tests. I was like, wait a minute, let's just sit for a minute and talk about that. You know, that's not normal. That's not how it's supposed to be. Learn. You're supposed to be challenged all the way along the ways. Especially once you get into medicine, because as my nephews are telling me, everything we learned in medical school, Aunt Maureen, had an asterisk next to it. And we go look at the asterisk and it would say, that is what research points out at this point, but it could change. Right? You're like, what are we supposed to believe, Aunt Maureen? It's all going to change before we're done at medical school. And it is, isn't it? Because that's how advanced the field is. But it's to adopt that work in progress mindset when really your ego has been wrapped around already knowing. Catching it and learning things very quickly. The minute you get where it's a little bit more. So it's trying to adopt that mindset. The rugged individual, who they also call like the soloist, is to ask for help. How many people in this room struggle with asking for help? Yeah. And I think it's because you're all in this school because you're gifted to a certain degree. You really are. And so people look to you to know. People look to you to be talented, and you don't want to admit that you don't know something or that you need help, when really the number one thing you could do, if you take nothing else from today, is to start asking for help. If you start asking for help, then you take pressure off of yourself instead of pushing it on. And so to just identify small goals and keep working on them as a genius as well. And as a rugged individual or soloist, to really start to develop a relationship with your mentors that you can let them guide, because they'll invite you to ask for help. They'll invite you to get information from them. They'll invite you to be coached by them. They'll invite that because they know that. They worked with a lot of students and they're very good here at coaching. I hear lots of stories about it. So it's let yourself be coached. Don't have to already know it. Don't have to be the expert while you're in school, right? And so the next is the expert. And that's the person who loves to work on specific skills needed or if you're an expert, it's good to go mentor and volunteer. And to get that mindset of I'm not in the expert space at all times, and neither is anyone else. Like no one can be the expert at all times. Want to not always be the expert you want to. And these are things that you can tell yourself, you can tell each other, your mentors can tell you, because telling yourself once isn't going to do it. You want a mindset of telling yourself the things on this slide over and over. Starts, like you said, in high school, starts to lock in, right? And then last is a superhero. Oh my gosh, do they expect you to be a superhero? Yes. Was it on TV? Like, has it been on TV since COVID started? Like you're all in costumes and superheroes, and you've all been amazing. Everybody in the medical profession has been really amazing, putting themselves at risk and helping others. You're not a superhero. You're just very special. Okay, you're very special. And the superhero needs validation from others. The superhero needs other people to clap and go, wow, like the athlete. You want that validation to come on the inside, because if it's mostly self-doubt and they have to affirm you, then you're at risk. You're at risk for illnesses, you're at risk for anxiety, for depression. And so when I say focus on internal validation, what does that mean to you? Example of how you do that, or how you try to do that, or how you've heard someone else doing that. What is internal validation? Anybody got an example? Fine or otherwise? Here's it in its most basic form. And this is directly related to imposter syndrome. What's wrong with me today? I don't feel so good. What's up? Oh, I didn't get as much sleep last night. I jumped up, got a little bit of bite for breakfast, and I've been drinking coffee since then, right? That's what's wrong with me right now. I'm okay, I just don't feel it because of all the caffeine inside of me. That's internal validation. I'm okay even though I don't feel like it. I'm okay even though I don't feel like it. I'm really doing well in school, even though I never feel like it. I'm doing well, I'm passing. There hasn't been a class that I haven't passed, right? That's internal validation. Anybody else have an example or?
Thinking, this reminds me of the natural tendency to compare ourselves to other people. And I think that is a big part of where we see like an increase in imposter syndrome over the past decade, even primarily with the use of social media and the role of that, where we're always seeing like people at their perceived best. And then if we don't feel that way, we're like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I always be this happy? Or why can't I be as successful or whatever? Even though if we stop and think about it in reality, those people we all feel the same. They're just choosing, just like you might do, right? You're choosing what to share with others and what to show, but it's not always a true reflection of your daily reality. And I think that can play into a lot of these different types that we see here, that expectation that we're not going to be as good or good enough compared to other people.
Which is common feeling when everyone starts out. But I love Sarah's example, because what I thought of when you were telling that whole example is, if you ask yourself, what's wrong with me? And then you can do what I talked about, like, okay, what's going on? I didn't get as much sleep last night, or I'm worried about my grandmother who's kind of just got put in the hospital. If you can answer that, and then what do I need? That's great. But if you ask yourself, what's wrong with me? Often with no, or with the answer is, well, everybody else looks like they're doing better than me. That's what we want to challenge. That's what we want to challenge. What's wrong with me? How come I'm not keeping up with everybody else? That internal self-doubt. So very good. Okay. So characteristics. I want to get through most of this. Really, the imposter is unable to realistically assess themselves, because it's always, as Sarah said, in comparison to others, but it's not in comparison to others. It's in comparison of how I idealize others. I put them up on a pedestal and I put myself down on the ground, and I criticize how I'm doing the same. Well, they're not struggling like me. They didn't have a hard time like me in that practice lab, but it's an inability to be realistic. So this is what I want you to do to be more realistic, is bounce your questions off of your mentors or your trusted peers. Okay. And we'll get to that in a minute again, but the characteristics are attributing your success to external factors. It's not me, it was luck, the other people in the class or in the lab. And the third one is what we've been talking about, and that's berating your performance. We have historical athletes historical medical people, historical actors and actresses who all berate themselves. Who all berate themselves are happy. So if you're berating yourself and you're like, well, I wouldn't say it to my kid, I wouldn't say that to a friend. Well, then you begin the process of, well, then I can't say that to me. It comes before I even know what's going on. So your first challenge is to catch it. Go, whoa, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Like someone else is talking to you, you're like, oh, wait a minute. And you say that to yourself. Fear that you won't live up to expectations always stays with you. It's with all of us in the beginning of our field, but it stays with you. You never. And we'll, in a couple of slides, we'll see why it doesn't. And then overachieving to what? Overcompensate, right? Like if I overachieve, then they won't see all the mistakes and flaws in me because everybody else looks better than me. And then sabotaging your own success, self-doubt, and then setting very challenging goals and feeling disappointed when you fall short. I will have all this figured out before I even start. When it's a work in progress when you get out into the field. Peer beaters, I really wanted to include this. And I really want to speak about this seriously. And that is that there are some things that you experience, are experiencing, and have experienced in your life that contribute to the imposter syndrome and actually play into it very strongly. The first is everybody know what ACEs is, right? The Adverse Childhood Experiences Study came out, in the 90s, it was kind of 90s when it first came out. And what it said was a landmark study, and it said people that have had these, of course, childhood abuse, neglect, physical, all kinds of stuff, or even we see kids that were severely bullied, right? That when they have those experiences in childhood, they come out of childhood with some unhealthy beliefs. And it creates depression and anxiety, but also creates physical issues. It creates diabetes, it creates hypertension, and they just have a whole list. And if you want to look at it, there's a whole ACEs Too High website that is great. So from ACEs comes unhealthy beliefs and unhealthy script, like I'm not good enough. And it's there all the time. It's like a back channel. It's like a back channel that you didn't even know existed. But once you discover it, you're like, well, wait a minute. I'm going to be sick if I keep this back channel. Then you start the long process of challenging it. See it as a process. So ADHD, anyone who has ADHD knows, or ADD knows, that you're working twice as hard as everybody else to accomplish the same thing, right? I have a little bit of ADD myself. And so I was always the last person to leave the test, right? In college. And I had to make my peace with that. It's like, well, I'm going to do it my way. That first person that walks out like that in 16 minutes, like that was not a deal to them. Like, oh my gosh, well, that's not going to be me because I'm going to check all my answers a second time, right? Anxiety and depression and burnout. When you see an individual who's suffering from imposter syndrome, they're more likely to be burned out. And the folks who are burned out are more likely to be suffering from imposter syndrome. And this is what that looks like, that you have like a system on at all times inside of you that's circulating thoughts, beliefs, fears that's working against you and you're trying to overcome at all times. And it takes your energy. It leaves you emotionally exhausted and sometimes physically exhausted as well. The impact. I read a lot of studies before I came today, and I chose the 62% experience, but it was anywhere from 62 to 80 experience imposter syndrome. 34% are at high risk of burning out because they can't change that internal dialogue. They can't counter it. They can't challenge it. They can't start those skills helped by a mentor because they don't want to ask for help. And they don't want to seem, like they're wrong and they're incompetent. And then they look on social media and they're like, because these people are all much more competent than me. 18% said they're on their knees from stress. And that 18% may have come into the field on their knees, just carrying through in the field, right? And this is a woman who wrote Ditching the Imposter Syndrome, a good book to read, okay? So the answer is to struggle in silence or open up. Either you continue to struggle and hide it, pretend, wear that mask, or that Halloween mask, whatever you want to put on, or you open up about it, which is very scary. Very scary for somebody to say, well, maybe you shouldn't be doing this. Maybe you shouldn't be in this field. Very scary to open up, but start with the most trusted person. Don't leave it on the inside. Some people, in response to imposter syndrome that they experience within the first year, couple years of their job, that they actually develop skills in response to it. They actually talk to that mentor. They actually like, try to work their way through it like you did in high school, right? They try to work their way through it, and their improved interpersonal effectiveness is stronger because they're talking about things. They might talk with their mentor about how they felt unable, worked through it, and then a new person comes to them. They're, oh yeah, I felt that. I remember that. That increases their interpersonal effectiveness with the team, increases the team. That provides motivation to try harder instead of just, having a crushing blow to themselves about how they're no good. They're like, well, I'm supposed to grow. It's my first year. I'm supposed to get better, right? And they use it for motivation to try harder and count their skills. It does encourage problem solving, and you learn to challenge yourself, but not in a way where you're dealing crushing blows, but where you're just like, okay, where am I now? Where should I be after the first couple of months? I remember when I first became a counselor, I talked to a counselor that had been in the field for 30 years at that point. And I said, I just can't wait until the time that I go into the room, I talk to somebody and I know what they're talking about and I know exactly everything to say back. And he said, well, tell me what that's like when you get there, Maureen. And that just really took a lot of pressure off myself when he said that. I remember another counselor saying, we were all talking and laughing once, and she's like, yeah, I've been doing it for 20 years now. I just want to go back to all my first clients and say, why don't you come back? I'm a little better now. So it encourages, the problem solving. You can challenge yourself and you can keep your ego in check. You can keep your ego in check. It's not debilitating it. Say, I shouldn't be too confident here. Who should I ask about this so that I know I'm bringing the best skills in? So the best way to combat is pull back. When people come to counseling, they pull back from how they think and how they act. And they sit across from me and they hear themselves say things and they edit. They're like, is that what I really think? Or is that really, do I need to continue thinking that? I can't believe that came out of my mouth. I need to keep kind of thinking that negatively about myself. And so self-reflection is the most powerful tool, is to sit down and think, well, how am I doing? How am I talking to myself? And in doing that, you're rewiring your brain. If it's on automatic and it's negative, you can rewire it and look at, okay, how should I respond to myself? How can I be a little bit kinder? Who said more compassionate and kinder? Said that, yeah, earlier. How can I increase the self-compassion and the kindness? Because my strength and my resiliency will be stronger. They question the negative self-talk or self-doubt. We've talked about that a lot already. They make a list of, okay, so I say that I'm flunking out, I'm not doing good. Let's just write the things I have accomplished this week. I thought there were only 2 things on this list. There's 10 things on this list. You surprise yourself. Engage, please, with a mentor or a support person. Don't go through school. Don't go through your career alone. Engage with somebody that can give you feedback and help you empower yourself. And even counter, like, how would you say to yourself? I don't see that as true at all. You're hitting it. You're doing good. And invite their participation in testing the truth. And this is testing the truth. I think things where I doubt myself and I fear about what I'm going to do, that's how I feel like an imposter. And those fears and that worry become reality to me. Because I fear it, it's going to happen, and it's reality. Testing that is, okay, I fear I'm going to kill somebody, but I haven't killed anybody. I fear I'm going to make a mistake. I have made a couple of mistakes. How did it go? You test the reality. And the statement behind that I want you to remember is, don't believe everything I think. Don't believe everything you think. Don't believe everything you worry. The negativity. And so you make a list of evidence, invite their participation in testing the truth, and in the perspective building, you want to recognize your fear as a feeling and not a fact. And it's a feeling that builds and it amps up your stress, like you talked about, until it kind of was making me sick. So don't believe everything you think. Learn to question it. Learn to question it, and question it by asking people around you. This is what I think. You think I'm being kind of hard on myself? And so what I want you to know is, if you're a student in the room, you have that access to us. Like I said in the beginning, it's 24 hours. You can go to our website and you can see all of the specialists that are on our website, and you can pick somebody and say, I want to talk about some of this stuff with one of those counselors. I just want to kind of bounce it off. No intensive therapy. I just want to bounce some of my self-doubts and some of my internal dialogue. I want to change it. I want it to be a little bit more empowering. And so it's free sessions per problem per year. You can do telehealth with us. A lot of people do. And we're here as your resource and help you create solutions. So questions. And I ran through that kind of fast. But what questions about imposter syndrome, how to know if you're experiencing it, what to say to someone else that you feel might be experiencing it?
Guys have been a really active group. I really appreciate it. I know Maureen does too.
Yeah.
All the chiming in with different examples earlier. Is there anything else, even if it's not a question, kind of like a final thought that you have or a realization maybe, as you sit here? Yeah, here we go. Here's some hands. We'll go Trish.
I just want to thank you, Maureen. I think it validates some of our feelings that we have. Like, I have to be this perfect superhero. Like you said, you see it all the time, and giving us a permission to shut off that voice in our brain and to get help. So thank you.
I tell people a lot, it's okay just to be human. Just join the human race. Yeah.
So this might be, no, I'm not going to start with a self-deprecation. I'm not going to do it. But I was today years old when I found out that the reason why when I diet and I can get within 5 or 10 pounds of my goal, I'll stop and I'll quit. Imposter syndrome. It won't be, I think my head is telling me it's not me anymore if I reach that goal, self-sabotage.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good example of it. There's also that like, well, if I take 5 more off, that means I can't do this or that. And that's not as much fun. Like, I like to have a treat every now and then. I don't want to be so rigid, and so it's both. It's both. It's like, no, if I get down there, then that's not me. It's also, I don't want to stay with all those habits. Like, I want to have a little more fun. And it's also, I don't want to be rigid. I don't want to stay in with those, which is the same thing, but excellent point. Excellent point. Thank you.
I was a perfectionist in nursing school and before that, and I still am. But when I was struggling with not getting the grade I thought I would on an exam, one of my faculty members said, like, did you expect to already know everything before you started nursing school? What was the point of you even coming?
Wow.
So you're here to learn and you're expected to make mistakes. And as a faculty member now, that's how that's what I don't expect perfection from students because it's impossible. But another thing that has helped me, because a lot of times things, imposter syndrome will lead to anxiety for me, is when I feel like I have a gap in knowledge or I feel like an imposter, sometimes it's because I a little bit am, like I may not be as experienced or have as much expertise as I need to have for what I'm about to do. So it helps me double down and study and become more prepared. And that helps me to an extent.
I like that a lot. I like that it just, when you're doing something in a new field, it's change and it does feel weird. And so it kind of gets to be a part of you. Yeah, go ahead.
I just like how you stress that everyone has these kind of feelings. Because I know that was one thing for me. I was like, oh my gosh, nobody else probably feels as inadequate as I do. Nobody else feels like this. So that means I can't talk about it.
Ah, I love that. Thank you.
And so for a long time, I kind of ignored everything and just kept trooping on.
Yeah. So
But that is not.
no
the
one
way to
else
go.
feels like this, so I can't talk about it. I think that's probably not close between 90 and 100%. That's why I use that one example of everybody else seems like they're doing okay. This is just me, because I think everybody has that. I love that you shared that. Thank you. Very good. And can you finish that? Nobody else is questioning, like me. Nobody else is suffering with this. So I can't talk about it, because if I talk about it, what's the next thought?
If I talk about it, people will see me as weak and pity me.
They'll see me as weak. They'll see me as not able. They'll see me,
Not
they'll
normal.
judge me. Yeah. Do you have anybody, would you all have somebody in your life that you're like, I don't have to worry about the judgment with this person? I don't have to, or sometimes that's why people come to us, they're like, everybody else in my life is just a little too judgmental. I just want to talk to somebody neutral that doesn't have any skin in the game, right? That will just let me say whatever. Very good. So the overall challenge is to realize it's natural to have a negative self-talk because you're accomplishing some great things. You will continue to accomplish great things. And it's natural to have some self-doubt. It's not that you have it, it's what you do with it. And so just as, what's your first name?
Caitlin.
Just like Caitlin just said, open up about it. Just like that one slide, you either open up or you suffer in silence. And if you suffer in silence, that suffering can become health, it can become physical, it can be more than you ever bargained for. So open up. We do a lot of EAP with a lot of organizations in town, and there was a CEO that introduced us and introduced a new EAP service. And he said, I want you to call when you need help and you're hurting. He goes, kind of like I called when my wife and I were having struggles and we had some marriage counseling and it really helped us. And I thought, wow. He validated that, didn't he? He's like, I'm human. I had to do it. You're human. Take advantage of it. It's here. That's what today is. You're human, not an imposter. You're not perfect. We don't want to be perfect. We want to keep learning, but you're human. Let yourself be human. You'll be stronger. You'll be more settled. You'll be less anxious, and you won't be suffering in silence so much. Decide who you can open up to. It isn't everyone. Decide who you can open up to. Okay, thank you all. And if you have any additional questions, you can ask Trish or Sarah, and they can forward them and I can respond to them. Okay.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you, Marina, for round of applause.